my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo. Where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course, and it is, well, it's not exactly Thursday. I am late on the podcast today. I had some technical difficulties yesterday, and by the time I got it figured out, I couldn't record the podcast. I had no time. So I apologize getting it in late. I've been on like a very tight schedule these last few weeks, and yeah, so there's like little room for error, like small margins for error, if you will, and unfortunately, because of technical difficulties, I couldn't get this out on time. So here we are, and I apologize, but I refused to not let the episode go up and to not do the episode regardless of setbacks. Accountability, folks, accountability. With that said, man, we are going to talk about Kamala Harris and the Latino vote. We will talk about Donald Trump and his plans for mass deportations if he is elected president. We'll also get into one of the favorite topics, like the basis of this podcast, right? Not feeling Latin enough. And there was an article with Jenna Ortega, the actress, talking about the idea of not feeling like she was enough, and also on like a positive side of things, she's been taking the power into her own hands to ensure, or to at least try to ensure, more Latin representation in places like Hollywood. So just amazing stuff. So we'll talk about her and Army Hand this segment. And quickly, is anybody else over like the summer? You're just like, you've had it with the summer. And I know that's like, check back in with me in like mid-November when I am just freezing my ass off here on the East Coast. But I don't know, man. The summer, I feel like it's so hard to just like stay on track and keep your shit in order. And I feel like I say that every time, and then it's like my excuse for like why things have gotten away from me. But yeah, the summer is just a lot, man. There's so much. I think there's so much going on, and it's hard to be disciplined. Maybe I'm gonna put it back on myself here, but yeah, the summer I'm kind of over it. I'm ready to kind of for everybody to crawl back into their cave, and I can just go back to being slightly antisocial and just I think that's where I'm the most comfortable. But on a positive side of things, I'm actually really excited. I'm just gonna celebrate this for a second before we get. I know this is Thursday Trends, but bear with me here. I did like finish the main parts of my book pitch. So the book I've been writing. So now I'm in the process of like the next stage of trying to get a book agent and working through that type of stuff. So yeah, I'm just celebrating my little win right here, because that was like one of the big projects I've been working on. Like obviously I'm not done as far as like all that needs to be done for it to actually get it into hopefully being published. But I did like the harder grunt work of sitting down, writing pages for it, and organizing thoughts and ideas together, and just getting it to a point now where it's just like, okay, sending emails and doing a little bit of research and things like that. So I'm excited about that, more so because hopefully it just alleviates some of the like crazy work I've been having to put in. And like I feel like whenever I have these big projects, it makes me sort of have to like put things to the side. Like I haven't been very active on social media and things like that, because I've just had to keep my head down. So just want to celebrate that out loud, celebrate myself for a second here. Now, with that said, let's talk about some of the nonsense, the BS from this last week in a segment we call For the People in the Back.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
And not for nothing, I'm just going to preface, it's been like a slow news week, which I think is a good thing, right? I feel like there hasn't been any crazy, thank God, tragedies or just wild things, at the forefront of like the headlines, aside from the shit show that this upcoming election is. So yeah, I guess, no news is good news, I guess, to a degree. Thoughts and prayers with everybody. I'm just going off the cuff here. Thoughts and prayers, everybody who has family who's in the Caribbean, and they've been dealing with the hurricane. I know my parents are in Puerto Rico right now, and even though the hurricane was only a Category 1 when it touched down in Puerto Rico, I know they were expressing it was still like super scary. So I know I think it's hitting Bermuda, and it's gone up to a Category 2 if I'm not mistaken. So definitely my thoughts and prayers for anybody whose family is possibly in the midst of dealing with that hurricane. Now, talking about U.S. and this upcoming election and Kamala Harris, I'm reading an article. I was pulling from a couple of articles, NBC News, and they talk about how Harris is making gains in Latino voter support, but many are still in play. They say Latino voters and leaders say they are enthusiastic about Kamala Harris as the Democratic presidential nominee, but for her to win their crucial support, they want to know where she stands on issues like the economy, immigration, and education. Vanessa Cruz-Nichols, an assistant professor of political science at Indiana University, says Harris has considerable potential to appeal to Latino voters, but is going to have to win over independents and those planning not to vote in the November election. Quote, she's got some work to do. Reintroduce herself, let people know where she stands on a variety of issues, Cruz said. She will have to work aggressively to appeal to voters, especially young Latino voters who are even more nonpartisan, more willing to either sit out an election or vote for a third-party candidate. What's sticking out to me as I read this, those planning not to vote in the November election. I want to choose my words carefully here, because I genuinely don't want to judge anybody. I really, like as I always try and when I try and touch, topics that, not to sound redundant, are touchy, or speak on topics that are touchy. I want to make sure that like I'm operating from what is my goal with this conversation. And my goal with this conversation is to energize or to remind people of how important and how much of a privilege it is to be able to vote in this country. And my goal is for you to actually understand that and be motivated to go vote, right? And me shaming you for potentially not voting is not, in line with that. But I think it's really important to really recognize that privilege, man. Like, there are so many people who are, have been going for years. I'm sure many of us know people who have gone through the process for years of trying to become a citizen and fighting for years and spending money and doing all these different things just so they can have that right to vote. And if you are born with that, or you have that privilege and you're choosing to not do so, it's really a shame, and I'm not saying everybody has to be, hyper fixated on politics and all these different things, but it affects your life. I mean, obviously the president, but locally as well. I think it's important to, especially with the internet, you can spend an hour of time just doing some research on some of the options that are available to you as far as political candidates, and be relatively informed on who's in line with what you believe and who's not, right? And then show up. And listen, I get it. I don't want to have to wait in line or my time is incredibly precious to me. I understand it. We're all juggling a lot of different shit. But again, like, this affects our lives. This affects generations to come. This is a privilege that so many people have fought and some people have died for us to be able to go and cast our vote. I mean, particularly as people of color, it's like, this was a system that was not designed with us in mind, right? They didn't want us to be able to have the privilege of voting. So that's why it's even more important for us to show up. There's really no excuse to not do so. I think, one of the greatest, I guess, things I've saw growing up, where it's not even like a question. Like, my parents participated in every single election. I can remember them dragging me as a little kid, and us at times having to wait, hours in the Bronx or whatever it was, or what felt like hours. Probably wasn't that long. to go vote, after school, me not wanting to be there at all, and them making it a point to do so, and to come out of work, and go and stop there no matter how tired they were to make sure their vote was being cast. This is pre being able to mail in your vote, which obviously it makes it even more, makes it even more convenient for us and gives us little to no excuse to vote, And I also, I think it's important to understand the issues and do your research on these candidates like they're talking about. I like that they're challenging Kamala to clarify her stance on a lot of issues. But my personal take is also this isn't a normal election. There's so much on the line here, so many dangerous what ifs if Donald Trump is elected once again. To me, it's democracy, versus a potential dictatorship if he's elected again. We've seen what happens here. I think it's interesting to me that that's not enough for people to be motivated and have their voice heard. And I think what we have to recognize is there's no perfect candidate, right? And I know one of the bigger issues, particularly with my generation and younger, is the U.S. support of Israel, and in turn the interpreted support of the atrocities that we've also seen going on with the people of Palestine. And I get that. I understand that you are trying to make a point by sort of holding your vote hostage, and just being angered by what you feel like is, conducive or contributing to a genocide of particular people and a colonized people. And I understand how that resonates with so many people. I mean, Puerto Ricans, I think, have really taken on this cause a lot, I've seen. And that's all well and good, and I salute you for taking a stance and fighting for what you believe is a human rights issue, which obviously it is. I mean, I've seen some of the videos and things of that nature from the war over there. But you can't do so at the expense of the place that you call home. Like, I get it, and I respect the passion for this, but if we don't have a country ourselves to go back to after this election, what good is your protest, really? I think, we have to sort of... I think this is just like an analogy for life. I don't even mean to get so deep into it, but I just think it's interesting, right? I talk a lot about, like, nuance. And I think nuance is something, it's so fucking crucial to us to be able to look at the world. And I don't say this as like somebody who's holier than thou, that has it all figured out, is the smartest person in the room. But one thing I will give myself credit for is I do my best to not look at things as black and white. And I try to assess from every angle, like, what happens if I make this decision, right? What are the consequences that are going to happen? What are the reactions that are going to happen, right? If I look at a particular situation, I try to do my best to, okay, I know how I emotionally feel about this, but what is also the real world sort of application of this, and again, repercussions or responses to it. And I understand how emotionally you might feel like the Biden-Harris administration has not done enough to protect the Palestinian people. They've done too much in aiding the Israeli government by weapons and things of that nature. And I completely understand the rationale and the sort of just emotion and anger that comes along with it from that perspective. But again, this isn't a normal election here. The person running on the Republican ticket is a monster. He's a divisive narcissist who will destroy anything and anyone to get what he wants. And we saw that before he was even president. I mean, fuck, he bankrupted the city of Atlantic City, basically. He was ripping people off in New York with real estate. He's a shady practitioner. And that's how he's operated. He doesn't give a fuck about these people that he's speaking to, his base. They're just the target that was easiest for him to galvanize. And if you're a person of color, you've seen the way he talks about us. I mean, what is a black job? The idea of immigrants are taking black jobs. Let's break that down, right? The stereotype of immigrants is that they are taking the sort of the jobs that immigrants work. This is the stereotype. Are the menial jobs, right, that nobody else wants to work. That is the stereotype of immigrants. They're the farm workers. They are the house, cleaners. They are the people working behind the scenes in a kitchen somewhere, right, working for low income. So though they're not fresh coming into this country and taking jobs as doctors, right? So when he says immigrants are taking black jobs, what is he saying to black people? Black people, the jobs that you guys are meant to have are these menial jobs. That's what he's talking about. That's racist as fuck. That black jobs, A, aren't, like, what the fuck does that even mean? But B, if immigrants are taking black jobs and the stereotype is that immigrants are working the worst jobs possible known to man, that means that the jobs that are designated for black people in this country, in Trump's mind, are the worst of the worst jobs, right? He's not saying black jobs as doctors, lawyers. No. Immigrants are taking black jobs. Again, the stereotype is immigrants are working the worst of the worst jobs. Because again, if they are illegal immigrants coming over here, they don't have the paperwork to work the best of the best jobs, right? So he's showing you his racism right there. And then the way he speaks about immigrants, calling us rapists, and murderers and violent criminals, right? And blaming the violence and crime in this country on illegal immigrants, right? Blanket statement right there that brown people, Latinos who are immigrating to this country are coming here to enact violence and to commit crimes. Meanwhile, he's a fucking convicted felon himself. That is what's on the ticket. And then you look into, the Project 2025, just everything, right? And he's the way he stacked the Supreme Court with 3 extreme conservative judges that are doing his bidding, that are willing to give him presidential immunity so he can do whatever the fuck he wants to do if he is president. The writing is on the wall right there. Right? Him saying, Christians, we need you to come out and vote, and this will be the last time you have to do so. What does that mean? Sure, you can fucking interpret it as anything you want to, but the fact that it's even open to interpretation of the fact that we may never have to vote again, that's enough for me to say, hey, this person is a danger to our country as a whole. And I understand if the current administration, which Kamala Harris is a part of, is not doing all that you feel like they should be doing as far as the conflict in Israel and Palestine. I understand you being angry about that. But unfortunately, the reality is, and this is where nuance comes into play, being able to look at it from all angles. The reality is this is not a normal election. The other candidate does not want democracy as we know it. So you can not vote in protest. You can vote for Trump in protest. You can vote for an independent candidate in protest. But guess what? At the end of the day, that is only going to potentially make your quality of life even worse. And that means the country as a whole even worse. And that means the world as a whole even worse. If you're not happy about how the U.S. is handling that conflict, again, I understand it. But what happens when we become a country who is completely in decline under the ruling of a racist wannabe dictator who is again, stops at nothing for his own self-fulfilling prophecies? That's what's on the ticket. That's what you have to begin to realize. I'm not saying you have to be fucking happy about it. I get it. But again, that's where nuance comes into play. And sometimes the decisions that we have to make are not always the ideal ones, but they're the ones, again, that have to be made. You have to pick, and it's not always going to be picking from the best of the best. It's not always going, I'm not saying, not denigrating Kamala's qualifications, because I think she's very qualified. But again, from the angle of you feel like this administration has not done enough in X, Y, and Z, on the other side of things, unfortunately, is literally a fucking crazy person. And that's the real decision that has to be made here and how you have to be looking at things. And again, it's not fun, it's not ideal, but this is a multi-layered situation we find ourselves in, and you can't just be so laissez-faire about it. And that's my take on all of that. Now, I got off tangent here. I'm going to quickly discuss, the idea of Latin voters, right? And in this article, getting back to it, they say the nation's largest minority group, which is Latinos, 19.5% of the total population, according to the 2020 census. Latinos form a key voting bloc in what's shaping up to be a tight presidential election. Harris, the daughter of immigrants, has won the backing of influential Latino groups, and some feel her success hinges on emerging young Latino voters. Maria Teresa, president of Voto Latino, says Harris jumping into the race has sparked a, quote, coalescing of the community. In focus groups that the organization started after President Joe Biden announced he would drop out of the race, more than half of young Latinos who initially said they were voting for a third party said they were shifting to vote for the Democratic Party. This is according to Maria Teresa. And she says, quote, there is no path to the White House without specifically the young Latino vote. Our path to a different direction of this country is through young people. Now, more than 6 in 10 Latino voters supported Biden in 2020, according to a AP Votecast, and 35% supported former President Donald Trump. However, a July poll from the Associated Press NORC Center for Public Affairs Research found that only about 4 in 10 Latinos said they were somewhat or very optimistic about the future of the Democratic Party, and about 1/4 of them said the same about the Republican Party. According to the same survey, Hispanic adults are divided in their opinions on Harris, with 44% holding a favorable view and 43% holding an unfavorable view. But about half of Hispanic adults said they would be satisfied with Harris as the Democratic nominee, up from 15% earlier in July. Whew. I'm like out of breath. I was tearing through that because I feel like I took too much time on that tangent. But listen, this isn't an ideal situation. I get it. But truthfully though, I am excited about Harris. I fuck with her. I really do. And also like certain, topics that are important to me, abortion and all the, or women's right to choose and all these things, like she's in support of that, right? This sort of backwards thinking that Donald Trump has tried to instill, where he's taking us back into this hateful place. Like, you have to realize that's what's on the ticket. The polarization that led to women's right to choose being taken away, book burning, fucking the biography of Roberto Clemente being taken out of schools in Florida and things of that nature. Like, all of this is under the polarization that was created by Donald Trump, that then fueled the worst people in this country to feel empowered to bring their white supremacist ideals to life. That's really what we're working with. And another 4 years of him would only empower and make them that much stronger and that much bolder in their hate. And that's what we have to understand is on the ticket right now. And again, I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying you have to, smile and skip, your way through the polls, but that's just where we are, unfortunately. So yeah, get out there and vote. And I'm actually going to touch on some things Donald Trump has said recently about putting mass deportations kind of as like this focal point in his campaign. But we'll first take a quick break and then we'll be right back. All right, we are back, and I'm pulling from a couple different articles here from usnews.com as well as AP News. And they talk about how Trump has, with his messaging, sort of put mass deportations at the forefront of his campaign. You had signs at the Republican National Convention that said, quote, mass deportation now. And Donald Trump pledged to expel millions of migrants in the largest deportation program in American history. Now, Trump, when he was pressed for specifics on his plan in an interview with Time magazine this year, he suggested he would use the National Guard and possibly even the military to target between 15 million and 20 people, even though, because obviously Donald Trump loves to exaggerate numbers, even though the government estimated in 2022 there were about 11 million migrants living in the U.S. without permanent legal permission. Now, Trump has pledged to, quote, immediately stop the invasion of our southern border and end illegal immigration. As part of the plan, he says he would immediately direct U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement to undertake the largest domestic deportation operation in American history. He would target people who are legally living in the United States but harbor, quote, jihadist sympathies, and revoke the student visa of those who espouse anti-American and anti-Semitic views. In a bid to secure the... By the way, anti-American views. What a loose fucking form of terminology. And this is where you have to begin to, like, read between the lines. Because this is what the right loves to do. You have a criticism of the U.S. government, you are automatically anti-American, even though it's baked in our Constitution, like the Founding Fathers wanted you to be able to critique your government. That's what separated us from a dictatorship, right? But in today's day and age, you have a critique of the American government, you are anti-American. And by the way, that's what makes things like this so scary, because that is a very broad terminology. They're going to call you anti-American because you post a critique of, the U.S. government, and now you're all of a sudden you're labeled as having, quote, jihadist sympathies. Again, this is the shit that's on the ticket right now. This is what we're voting for. Now, in a bid to secure the U.S.-Mexico border, Trump says he will move thousands of troops currently stationed overseas and shift federal agents, including those at the Drug Enforcement Administration and FBI, to immigration enforcement. He also wants to build more of the border wall. Trump wants to reimpose his travel ban that originally targeted 7 Muslim-majority countries and expand it to, quote, keep radical Islamic terrorists out of the country, end quote. In the wake of the Hamas attack on Israel, he's pledged to put in place, quote, ideological screening for immigrants. His aim, bar, quote, dangerous lunatics, haters, bigots, and maniacs, as well as those who empathize with radical Islamic terrorists and extremists. Again, all of this stuff is open to interpretation. I mean, we've seen this in this country where everybody was being accused of being a communist at one point, right? When there was the Cold War and people were wrongfully accused. I mean, this is like the Salem witch trials all over again, burning people at the stake because they were being accused of witchcraft, right? Now, moving on, he said to deter migrants, he has said he would end birthright citizenship using an executive order that would introduce a legally untested interpretation of the 14th Amendment. The order would prevent federal agencies from granting automatic citizenship to the children of people who are in the use illegally. It will require that at least one parent be a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident for their children to be eligible for passports, social security numbers, and other benefits. I mean, a lot of the audience that listens to this podcast, many of us are products of immigrants, right? Again, this is somebody who is targeting the places that we come from, the people that we love. And to me, it's like, how do you... I'm going to rephrase my statement because I don't want to be judgy. I'd be curious to see... You hear a lot of the rhetoric coming from him. As Latinos, how are you able to support this person and make excuses for it? It's just, yeah, we are targeted by this person's hate, and again, it bleeds itself into the street. I mean, it bleeds itself into people proposing bills where you can shoot to kill migrants who step on your property in crossing the border, and then it leads people to talking about how they can't wait to move to that state so they can kill it dehumanizes people, and again, the immigration is nuanced, right? And obviously the system in place as it stands right now is not ideal and not effective, but you don't have to spew hate and blame all of your problems on a specific group of people. That is just causing chaos and, again, causing more hatred towards people that look like you and I. And again, these are things that are on the ticket. It's somebody using hate and fear as a means to gain the support of people, and those who already have that deep-rooted hate of people of color, they're feeling empowered and emboldened to, showcase it and speak about it and live a life of just racism, So yeah, that's it. That's what's going on. On a positive side of things, let's get into Jenna Ortega, her conversation around not being enough, but also what she's doing in Hollywood, which is amazing. We'll do that for our Mi Gente segment. Mi Gente. All right, so Jenna Ortega, actress, she's a star of the Netflix show Wednesday. She is also in the last two Scream movies, I want to say. She's a big star, obviously. She's also in the remake of Beetlejuice that's coming out. And she had a article in Variety talking about something that obviously is a passion of mine to speak about. It is the premise of this podcast, but the idea of not being Latin enough, right? In the article, she says, oftentimes you're just not good enough. Because I wasn't born in a Spanish-speaking country, I know people have a hard time connecting with me. She says in the article, I'm reading a breakdown of it from wearemetoo.com, where they say Ortega herself has a hard time dealing with her lack of knowledge in her mother's first language, saying, quote, "I'm so jealous every time I hear my mom speak perfect Spanish," she said. Yep, relatable. When I'll be seeing my dad just fucking let that shit fly. My mom too, but my dad, it's his first language. And my mom is actually very good at it. I have to give her credit, and she's self-taught. But my dad, when we be in Puerto Rico, I hear him speaking to people back home, family, whatever it might be, and he's just like in his element doing it. I'm like, man, I wish it flowed that naturally for me. Meanwhile, I'm like stuttering my way through practical sentences. But hey, I'm getting better. I got to give myself credit. Now, according to the Pew Research Center, while most U.S. Latinos speak Spanish, not all do. 24% of all Latino adults say they can only carry a conversation on in Spanish, a little or not at all. On the other hand, among third or higher generation Latinos, 65% say they cannot carry on a conversation in Spanish. Furthermore, about half of U.S. Latinos who don't speak Spanish have been shamed because of it, according to the Pew Research Center. Around 54% of Latinos who say they speak no more than a little Spanish say another Latino has made them feel bad about it. Yep. Now, Jenna Ortega can count herself among the latter. Quote, "I think there's a part of me that carries a bit of shame. For a second, I was almost nervous to speak about my family's background because I feel like I was made to feel like it wasn't valid." And I think this is super interesting. There's a lot of like anxiety that comes along with for me personally, my experiences. There was always a lot of anxiety that would come along when I would find myself sort of having to be two things. There's anxiety that came along when I found myself having to be the sole representation for like Latinos if I was the only one in the room. This happened a lot in the Breakfast Club, which obviously it's a big platform. Oftentimes you're live on a microphone with millions of people listening. That's going to be anxiety inducing in general, but it definitely was something I was like, almost felt like a phony, like I wasn't qualified to be the Latin representation. And then on the flip side of it, at times when I find myself amongst other Latinos and we're kind of having these conversations like, mixed group of people or whatever, I almost feel like I have to prove myself as being like knowledgeable, and like trying to impress them almost, right? And yeah, it's exhausting, obviously, an exhausting experience because you sort of get out of your own body and you're in your head, and it's like you're trying to be perfect and figure out the perfect thing to say, to, you know, get the cosign and the validation and all these different things. And like, that's just an exhausting way to live. And, you know, as somebody who tries to preach authenticity and living authentically, yeah, I almost at times feel like a hypocrite when I find myself falling into that. Now, it happens less and less because I've found sort of comfort, and I've adapted an identity that is personal and authentic to me, you know. And in those moments where other Latinos might try to shame me, it doesn't sting as much. You know, I feel comfortable sort of standing up for myself or laughing it off genuinely. Where in the past I might have been like trying to defend myself, but almost like in a way of seeking their validation, you know. Whereas now I'm like, I'm all right with you, you know, calling me, you know, fake Latino or making fun of me because I can't speak it, you know, fluently, or I might not be like an amazing salsa dancer or something like that. So like I'm okay with that. You're not like, it doesn't cut to the core like it used to, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But it's yeah, man, I think, and that's a part of all of our journey. I think what I've sort of come to terms with, or how I compartmentalize it in my head, is, yeah, I'm never going to be the person who is just like the stereotypical Latino, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but like who's, you know, rattling off Spanish without thinking about it, and, you know, has like all of these deep cultural memories, and is just like this fucking encyclopedia for like unspoken Latin cultural, you know, fucking moments or whatever it might be, right? Like, I might have to, you know, I'm gonna be the person that, you know, second guesses his Spanish and is constantly learning more about his culture and constantly has to ask questions, and is going to have to have refreshers of certain cultural things, be it food, be it whatever. And I think I've gotten to a place of like, I'm okay with being that person, and I don't feel less than being that person. And I know that I have a place in this community as that person. And that's the way that I compartmentalize it now, where I think before I did everything I could to try and fit and check every box of what it meant to be Latin enough, you know, and come across as that. And now I'm sort of just okay with at times fumbling my way through it, because that's my authentic story. And as we, you know, read in articles like this one where they break down some of the statistics, that's a lot of our people's stories. And it doesn't make I think to me that is a part of Latin culture, at least, you know, American Latinos, you know, or I'm sure, you know, I know people who listen to this are in Europe and things like that. Insert whatever makes sense for you. But those of us who didn't necessarily grow up in our motherland where our parents or grandparents are from, you know, we are going to sort of have this otherness. But again, to me, that's a part of what it means to be Latino. There's a sector of our community, a large portion of it, that does exist in that otherness, and it's authentically us, and it's authentically Latino, because, you know, that's who we are. And I think that's where I am mentally. And I think that's where it seems like somebody like Jenna Ortega is getting to as well, where you no longer sort of have the shame about it, and you no longer fear speaking about it because you feel like people are going to call you out, but instead you embrace who you are and you do your part unapologetically. And that's what she's doing now with some of these projects, which I wanted to salute her for. And in the article, they say, after fighting for the opportunity to work alongside producers during the first season of Wednesday, Jenna Ortega finally wears the hat during the second season. At first, it was a matter of creative concerns. Quote, I think it's natural to be fearful of signing your life away and wanting some sort of agency or wanting confirmation that your voice would be heard, she said. I'm aware of my position as an actor, but I know that I'm not in charge. But I think someone like Wednesday, who is in every scene, it only makes sense for that person to be that involved in what's going on behind the scenes because she's on screen every second of the project. And they say now with a second wave of fame and visibility, she's executive producing 3 films. Woof! Good for her, man. Beetlejuice will hit theaters this fall, which I guess she was EP on. The long-awaited season of Wednesday on the horizon for 2025. Jenna Ortega knows there's a lot more to do. She says, quote, I would love to be able to craft stories that show how powerful Latinos can be. And this is the goal right here, right? Well, first and foremost, in the article, they say that Wednesday is recognized probably as the most streamed show in Netflix history. So bigger than like Stranger Things and I can't remember the other one that was big. Not Hunger Games, Squid Games. So that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And again, I think this is what happens when you begin to, I don't want to say accept who you are. I think love who you are, right? And when you say, I'm not going to allow other people to define me, and I know that I'm a member of this community and I have a place here, and I'm going to do what I can to help my community, right? And I think this is, obviously she's doing it on a much larger level, but this is what I arrived to when it came to Life as a Gringo, right? Where it was like, I love my community. I want to do so much for it, but I'm not doing it out of fear of being called out for not being Latino enough, for not being a real Latino. And you sort of get to a place, and even like zooming out, it's like, how ridiculous is that, by the way? I have a potential opportunity to help a community, to do my part, to bring awareness and speak to my community, but I'm not going to do so because of the backlash I'm getting from my community, from that same community. Like that, it's ridiculous. And I'm not critiquing her or anybody, because I went through that as well. But in retrospect, it's so ridiculous that I'm going to allow the bullshit of other people and their old world ideas to stop me from helping people. And that's where you have to get to a point to, of being like, listen, I know I'm going to get people hating on me. I know I'm going to get people telling me it's not my place, but fuck them. Like, those people are part of the problem. They're why we are being held back, why more isn't being done within our community, because they're the gatekeepers, right? I feel I get this critique on TikTok, and when I post videos about Puerto Rico, people, oh, shut up, you live in the States, you can't talk about it. Bro, I'm trying to help. I'm trying to bring awareness to what's going on the island, and you are more concerned with where I grew up rather than like the positive work that I'm trying to do here. You're a part of the problem. You're literally trying to silence people who are trying to help, who are doing the work. And that's what would happen with somebody like Jenna Ortega. If she gave into that pressure of not being enough, there wouldn't be a Latina executive producing 3 movies that are supposed to hit theaters. There wouldn't be a Latina who's probably going to end up putting Latinos in jobs that they wouldn't have otherwise been in, or bringing Latino stories to the screen authentically. And that's important work. But again, it may have never happened if she succumbed to the criticism that comes from, just not being born in the place that your parents were, or you're Spanish, or whatever it is. And it's like, bro, she's about to do work, or is doing work, that is going to help so many people in our community beyond what any of us are even capable of comprehending, because you don't know who's watching these things and becoming inspired and goes on to create something. Like, and to think that we wouldn't have that solely because some haters wanted to try to tell this girl who she was or tell any of us who we are. It's just, that's crazy and ridiculous to me. So salute to her for doing the work. Now, with that said, let's tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew.
Time for conclusion stew.
All right, so I know I started saying it was like a slow news week, and I just went off on a tangent about a bunch of things. But yeah, Latino votes and Harris and Trump and all the, I mean, again, nuance. Ain't nothing be perfect. It's never the perfect candidate. It's never, unfortunately, an ideal situation in most things in life. You got to kind of roll what you have. And again, what's happening here on the ticket? And again, it sounds like I want to make it a point. I'm not speaking like Harris isn't qualified. I think she's amazing. But for those on the fence and have issues, I get it. But like, nuance again. What is the alternative? You not participating, what happens? Potentially, it makes your life and the lives of millions and millions of other people that much worse, and potentially generations to come. That's what we have to be thinking about. So show up to vote. I mean, that's really my greatest statement. And yeah, this whole thing with not being Latin enough and this conversation, like, stop. Can we stop? It's 2024. Stop with the nonsense. It blows my mind to think people might not do the great work that they're doing. Like Jenna Ortega is going to be EPing stuff again, potentially wanting to put people in power from our community. To think that a bunch of gatekeepers are more concerned with asinine rules as what makes you quote unquote Latin enough or enough. They're more concerned with that than actual real life issues or places that we could be improved upon. That literally will never blow my mind. It will never stop blowing my mind. Gatekeepers are concerned with like just so much bullshit, and as a result hold back progression. That's literally the world we live in. And it's not just obviously in like the Latin community or this topic at hand. Like, let that be a lesson for anything that you want to do that seems different or seems crazy to people. Like, if it were up to the gatekeepers, we'd have the same shit over and over and over and over again. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. That's not how progress happens. These people are obsessed with familiarity and comfortability. And that's just not how greatness happens. That's not how change occurs. These people, it's like you cut your nose off to spite your face type of shit, right? Y'all are worried about who's a real Puerto Rican. Meanwhile, you're bashing those who might actually have plans to help your life be exponentially better. You know, that's selfish for me talking about reactions that I get. Like, it's crazy, you know? And again, like, there's enough of us who feel this way that this is a real thing. We are real members of the community. We have a place to participate. Like, the gatekeeping shit is so stupid to me. And salute to everybody doing the work to kind of break free of those chains, because that's what they are. They're chains that hold us back from our greatness and hold us back from progressing as a community, as a culture. So that's that. With that said, thank y'all so much for tuning in. Thank you for your patience. I know I got this out a little later than usual, but I appreciate y'all. And I will catch you on Tuesday with a brand new episode. Till then, stay safe and we'll talk soon. Peace.